talk about the skeletal tissue. And the structures are formed by the skeletal tissue. Skeletal tissue structures include cartilages, bones, and ligaments. Those structures are formed by the skeletal tissue. So we basically talk about those structures. We'll talk about cartilages, 3 different types of cartilages. You already know hyaline cartilage, right? Most common type, fibrocartilage and elastic cartilage. We'll talk about that. Then we'll talk about the bones. The main structure of the skeletal tissue. You know, the skeleton consists of the skeletal tissue, right? Because the skeleton consists of the bones, cartilages, right? And those are the main structures of the skeletal tissue. And ligaments at the joints. We'll talk about the bones, classification of the bones, bone markings, covering of the bones, different types of cells present in the bones and their functions, and the regulation and the blood forming tissue. Inside the bone, you know that we have the red bone marrow, where the blood cells are formed. Blood cell forming tissue is the bone marrow. So, again, bones, cartilages, and ligaments are formed by the skeletal tissue. Among these 3, only bones have blood vessels and nerves. Cartilages and ligaments are avascular, no blood vessels, no nerves. So if you cut the ligament, you won't see bleeding, you won't feel pain. Only bones have blood vessels and nerves. Cartilages. 3 types of cartilages. Most common type is hyaline. Which structures are formed by the hyaline cartilage? I mentioned before, but I am repeating again. Fetal skeleton, the whole skeleton of a fetus is hyaline cartilage. Number 2, articular cartilage. You have seen in synovial joint, remember the end of the bones are covered by hyaline cartilage, right? So that is the articular cartilage, which is hyaline. Number 3, respiratory tract. Your trachea, your bronchi, those are formed by hyaline cartilage. Respiratory tract. Number 4, costal cartilages. You know, the ribs are attached to the sternum by these cartilages, right? These are called costal cartilages. So, if I ask you in which structures you will find the hyaline cartilage, those are the structures. Fibrocartilage. Only few structures in your body are formed by fibrocartilage. One is intervertebral discs. These intervertebral discs. Okay. Number 2, pubic symphysis. You already know pubic symphysis, right? 2 hip bones are attached by this piece of cartilage, that is pubic symphysis. And number 3, what? Meniscus in the knee joint. So those are fibrocartilaginous structures. Elastic cartilage has plenty of elastic fibers. That's why the structure has a lot of plasticity. You can change the shape by pressure, and when you remove the pressure, it goes back to its actual shape. Which structure? Anybody?
Ear.
Ear, right? Ear you can easily change the shape, but it goes back to its actual shape. And another structure, epiglottis, inside the larynx. So epiglottis and ear are elastic cartilage, and both start with E, right? In this picture, you can see the skeleton. You can see where the hyaline cartilages, fibrocartilages, and elastic cartilages structures are located. Okay. You see that hyaline cartilage, as I have mentioned, fetal skeleton is number one. Number two, you see the costal cartilages, articular cartilages in the joint, and another one I said what? Bronchial cartilages, trachea and bronchi. Then elastic cartilage, you see by green color, ear, and epiglottis inside the larynx, the green one. And fibrocartilages, as I have mentioned, meniscuses, pubic symphysis, and intervertebral discs, right? Functions of the bones. You know already that we divide the bones of the skeleton into two groups, axial and appendicular, right? So those two groups of bones have been shown by two different colors here. Okay. Functions of the bones: support. Bones form the skeleton, and the skeleton supports the whole body. We know that. That's the best example. Protection. Important organs, for example, your brain, right, is protected by the cranial bones. Your eyeballs are protected by the facial bones, right? Nose is protected by facial bones. The structures inside the mouth protected by facial bones. Your ribs protect your what? Heart, right? And lungs. So you see that bones protect important organs of your body. Movement. We know that bones move at the joints, right? Bones form the joints where we move our body parts. But to move the bones, can you put your coffee outside? And you forgot probably. Okay. So bones form the joints, right? Where we move our body parts. But to move the bones, you need what? Muscles. Without muscles, you cannot move the bones, right? So, bones form the joints where we move our body parts with the help of the muscles. Storage of minerals. Important minerals like calcium, phosphorus, those are heavily stored in the bone. So if your body needs calcium, bones will release calcium. Make sense? Because bones store plenty of calcium. If in your blood calcium goes down, bones will do what? Release the calcium to increase the blood calcium concentration. Blood cell formation. Inside the bone, you have bone marrow, and that is the primary site for the blood cell production. Okay. Inside the bone, also you have fats and triglycerides are stored in the bone. Now, classification of the bones. How we classify the bones? We classify the bones in two ways. One is by shape, and another is by texture. Okay. By shape, we classify into short, long, irregular, flat. You have seen all different types of bones, right, in the lab. you have seen long bones. Can you give me an example of long bone? Femur is the longest, right? Humerus, tibia, fibula, radius, ulnar, those are long bones. They have what? Upper and lower ends, right? Two ends and a shaft. Make sense? So, long bones are long, like femur, humerus, tibia, fibula, radius, ulnar. They have two ends connected by a shaft. Short bones. Good examples are carpal bones in the wrist. You know, these are short, right? Cubical shaped bones. Carpals. Irregular bone. Vertebrae. You remember vertebrae? Has a body and processes like transverse processes, spinous process, superior articular, inferior articular, right? So, irregular, doesn't have any particular shape. Okay. Flat bones. Give me an example of flat bone. Ribs. Cranial bones, right? Your parietal bone, occipital bone, those are flat, right? Flat bones are flat but slightly curved, like this. Sternum, another good example, right? Sternum, this one is a flat bone. Make sense? So, cranial bones, sternum, those are good examples of flat bones. They are flat and slightly curved. One type of short bones are called sesamoid bone. Example, patella, kneecap. Kneecap is also called sesamoid bone. In some places, you will see they have classified into 5 different types. They have included sesamoid in another type of bones, but in your book, it belongs to short bone. By texture, we divide into compact, which is the hard bone, and spongy, which is the soft bone. You know, when you eat a chicken leg, right, both ends are soft, right? You can easily crash, but middle part, shaft is hard, right? So you have compact bone, which is the hard bone, and spongy bone, which is soft bone. Okay, so those are 2 types by texture. So that's how we classify the bones, by shape, by texture. Spongy bone is also called cancellous bone. Cancellous bone. Now, we'll see the structure of a long bone. A long bone has how many ends? Everybody? 2. A few minutes ago I said 2 ends, right? And connected by a shaft, right? Okay. So, ends of the long bone are called epiphyses. So, this is a long bone. Okay. These 2 ends are called epiphyses. Now, this is epiphysis. This is another epiphysis. If I use multiple, more than one, I say what? Epiphysis. Like, you know, symphysis, symphysis. Cis is singular, ses is plural, right? So, we have upper and lower ends, those are called epiphysis, and the middle portion is the shaft, which is called diaphysis. epiphysis and one diaphysis. That is the long bone. Now, inside the shaft of the long bone, you have a cavity. So this cavity is called the medullary cavity. In early stage of life, medullary cavity is filled with red bone marrow. Red bone marrow in early part of life. But in adults, what happens, the red bone marrow is replaced by yellow bone marrow. So red bone marrow you will find in children's, okay, and in adults you will find yellow bone marrow. Red bone marrow is replaced by yellow bone marrow in adults, and which is actually fat. Yellow bone marrow is adipose tissue or fat. Okay? So that fat stores energy. Okay? Now, the medullary cavity is surrounded by compact bone. So in the shaft, this bone is hard, compact bone. Okay? At the end, just the covering is compact bone, like this. This is the compact bone, thin layer of compact bone that covers the ends, but inside you will find spongy bone, trabeculae. These are called trabeculae. The process is like this. Okay, spongy inside, and only the covering is compact. Okay, but most part is spongy. That's why it is soft. You can easily crash it. One thing, remember, very important, you write it down, that inside the spongy bone, you will find the red bone marrow throughout the life, whole life. Always. Inside the spongy bone, the red bone marrow is present throughout the life. But inside the medullary cavity, as you already know now, that in early part of life you have red bone marrow, but it is replaced by yellow. So in adults, you have yellow bone marrow in the medullary cavity, but at the ends, always red bone marrow. Okay, so these are trabeculae inside the spongy bone, okay, and you see a lot of spaces inside the spongy bone. Inside the compact bone, you don't have those spaces, okay? Flat bone. If you see the structure of a flat bone, it looks like a sandwich. It has outer and inner compact, and in between spongy. So you see here, compact, compact, and in between you have the spongy bone. This is the flat bone, structure of a flat bone. Okay? And as I have mentioned, spongy bone always contains the red bone marrow throughout the life, right? So now if I ask you that in an adult skeleton, where you will find the spongy bone? Inside the ends, right, of long bones and inside the flat bones. Is it clear? That means what? That means red bone marrow is present in those structures in adults, in those bones, flat bones and ends of the long bones, always producing blood cells. Marking on the bone. You have seen that many different types of structures like lines, ridges, right? Tubercles, tuberosity, trochanters, condyles, right? Those structures are or processes attached to the bone. So we'll see different markings on the bone. Those are called the bone markings. Some of those structures are for the attachment of muscles and ligaments. So some of those structures provide attachment to the muscles and ligaments for attachment. Which structures are for attachment of muscles and ligaments? Tuberosity, crest, trochanter, line, tubercle, epicondyle, spine, and process. Quickly, what are those structures? Tuberosity are usually round projections on the bone, kind of round structure on the bone. You remember radial tuberosity here. This is the radial tuberosity, right? So it's kind of round. Crest. Crest, you know, when we see the mountain, we see the top part of the mountain, we say the crest of the mountain, right? So crest is narrow, prominent ridge on the bone. For example, iliac crest. This is the ilium, you know, of hip bone, and this part is called what? Iliac crest. Make sense? Top part. Trochanter. Have you seen trochanter? Greater and lesser trochanters. Large irregular bony mass. You see here. This is the femur. You must remember. Greater trochanter. This is greater trochanter, right? Large irregular bony mass. For the attachment of gluteal muscle, this big muscle gets attached here. Line. On some bones, you will see lines. For example, in femur, you have linea aspera, a line, linear line. Supracondylar lines. Above the condyle, you have supracondylar lines like this, okay? When you will see the bone next time, you see that this is a line, linea aspera, and above the condyles, you have supracondylar lines. Tubercle. Tubercle are like baby tuberosity. Small round projections are tubercles. Example, you have already seen greater and lesser tubercles at the upper end of the humerus, right? Greater tubercle, lesser tubercle, you have seen that. Epicondyle. At the lower end of femur, you have two condyles, right? These two big condyles. But condyles are not for the attachment of muscles. That's why you don't see condyle here. But epicondyles are just above the condyle here. This whole thing is the condyle, and on the condyle you have raised area, that is epicondyle, for the attachment. Now, this condyle is like, you know, sometimes you take your small child to walk with you, right? After a while, your child sometimes say, Dad, I can't, or Mom, I cannot walk anymore. You put your child on your shoulder, right? So you are condyle and your child is epicondyle, sitting on the condyle, okay? So, epicondyle. Spine, sharp, slender projections. Spine, you know, spinous process. Spine of the scapula. In the back of the scapula, you have the spine. Remember that? So, spines are also present in some bones. Process, any projection. can be termed as process that sticks out from the main part of the bone. Like this is the bone, this part is sticking out, right? So we can term it as a process. This is another process, okay? So, example, this is called coracoid process, like bird beak. Coracoid process sticks out from the scapula. Make sense? Spinous process again, transverse processes from the vertebrae, right? Superior articular processes, inferior articular processes. This is the styloid process, very sharp pointed, right? So, processes are any bony prominence. So, those are for the attachment of the muscles or ligaments. Now, the structures that help to form the joints. Some structures are to form the joints. For example, very good example is head of the humerus. This is the head of the humerus. Forms which joint? Shoulder joint, right? Head of the humerus forms shoulder joint, we know that. Head of the femur forms what? Hip joint, right? Hip joint. You know the socket, right? Acetabulum, head of the femur. Here is the glenoid cavity, right? Head of the humerus. So head is to form joint. Facet. In vertebrae, you have seen inferior articular process and superior articular process, and they get attached like this. And this part of the process is, when you see next time, just see it. It is very flat, nice, flat, smooth surface. And this is also nice, flat, smooth surface. These are called facets. They get attached to each other like this to hold the vertebrae together. Okay? So, flat, smooth, articular surface. Condyle. Now you see the condyle, because condyles form the joint here, like lateral and medial condyles of the femur from the knee joint. We know that. Ramus, arm-like part of a bone, is sometimes termed as a ramus. This is the ramus of the mandible. You have already seen it in the lab, and this part sticks out from the ramus and forms the temporomandibular joint. So, those are the structures that help to form the joints. So, these are the structures help to provide attachment for the muscles and ligaments, and these are the structures help to form the joints. Okay? In the bone, you will also see depressions and openings. Meatus. This is called external acoustic meatus. This one, outer ear canal. So canal-like, tube-like structure or tunnel-like structure is called a meatus. Is it clear? Have you seen tunnel? Sometimes you drive through the tunnel, right? Or tube or canal-like a structure in the bone is called what? Meatus. Is it clear? Good example, external acoustic meatus. Sinus, cavity inside the bone. Which bones have many sinuses? Facial bones, right? For example, largest sinuses in the maxillary bone, right? You know that. Frontal sinuses in frontal bone, right? So, cavity, air-filled cavity inside the bone. Fossa. Okay, anybody remember any fossa? Supraspinous, infraspinous fossa, yes, she's right. Another fossa, very prominent, that very important one, a gland sits in it. Hypophyseal fossa. For what? Pituitary gland. Remember? In which bone? Sphenoid. Sphenoid, right? Hypophyseal fossa, like this. So fossa is sink-like depression. Make sense? For glands or, fats sometimes sit there. Groove. Sometimes I think all of you know, on woods we see long, depression like this, elongated depression. We say groove, like this. Make sense? Long, narrow depression. So groove is like this, elongated depression, okay? In which blood vessel or nerve can nicely fit. Make sense? Blood vessels or nerve can nicely fit in it or lie in it. Groove. If you see, the depression is like sink-like depression, like kind of round, that is fossa. If it is long, elongated for the blood vessel or nerve, that is groove. Okay. Fissure, opening in the bone. If the opening in the bone is elongated like this, that is called a fissure. Not round. This is a fissure. Make sense? So, good example. When you see the skull, you see superior and inferior orbital fissures, like this. If you see the opening in the bone, most of the openings are kind of round. Those are called foramen. So this is a foramen, round or oval shape, okay? And if it is long, that is called what? Fissure. Is it clear? This is a fissure, this is foramen. Now, if the openings are very tiny, very small, foramina. So foramen is large, foramina small. Make sense? Do you remember olfactory foramina? In the ethmoid bone, right? For that, olfactory nerve fibers pass through it. Tiny walls. So those are the depressions and openings. Now you tell me, where did you see many foramen? In which bone? In the bottom of the skull, right? In the bottom of the skull you have seen many foramen, right? The largest one is foramen magnum for the spinal cord. Remember that? There are many others, right? Foramen oval, remember? Rotundum, jugular foramen, right? You have seen many. Why? In the bottom of the skull you have so many foramen. Spinal cord and blood vessels, right? As well as cranial nerves. We have 12 pairs of cranial nerves, right? So they get in and out. So that's why you have so many holes. I have already mentioned that a long bone has two ends. Those are called epiphyses, and one shaft, that is called the diaphysis. Inside the diaphysis, you have the medullary cavity, right? In early part of life, it contains the red bone marrow, and in the late part of life, the red bone marrow is no more there. You have what? Yellow bone marrow, which is fat or adipose tissue. Okay? But at the ends, you always have red bone marrow throughout the life. Covering of the bone. Now let's see the covering. Bone is covered by periosteum. Peri means around, perimeter. We use the term a lot. Peri means around, osteum means bone. So periosteum is the outer covering of the bone. Makes sense, right? Periosteum. Now periosteum has two layers. How many? Two layers. Outer layer is called the fibrous layer of periosteum, and inner layer is called osteogenic layer. Okay, so outer fibrous and inner osteogenic layer. You remember articular capsule around the synovial joint? Remember that? You did draw the picture. So outer is fibrous. Why? Because fibrous means tough, right? So outer one should be tough to protect, right? And inner one is osteogenic. That means the bone tissue is formed from inner layer. That's why it is called osteogenic. Osteo means bone, genesis, right? Production, formation. Okay? So osteogenic, there is the inner one. And in the inner layer, you have different types of bone cells. So you have bone cells in the osteogenic layer. And bone cells are osteoblasts, osteocytes, osteoclasts, and the stem cell that form these bone cells is called osteogenic cell. So osteogenic cells are the stem cells of the bone cells. So all these cells come from the osteogenic cell, because osteogenic is the stem cell. So those are four different types of cells in the bone. Now, those are two layers of periosteum. Now, in the inner surface of the compact bone around the medullary cavity, this is the medullary cavity, you know, inside the shaft, just around the medullary cavity, you have another layer that is called endosteum. Endo means inside, you know, endosteum. So periosteum is the outer layer, endosteum is around the medullary cavity, and periosteum has two layers in it, outer fibrous, inner osteogenic layer. Osteogenic layer is responsible for the formation of bone tissue, and it has different types of cells. Here, you see, this is the shaft, and this is the periosteum, and this is the endosteum, yellow bone marrow. So this is the adult long bone. Okay, so how many bone cells we have in the bone?
4.
Okay, 4, including the stem cells, right? Good. Stem cells are called osteogenic cells. That makes sense, right? Osteogenesis. And osteoblasts. Osteoblasts are young cells. Osteoblasts are what? Young bone cells. And osteocytes are mature cells, adult cells. And osteoclasts are giant cells. big. And osteogenic cells are stem cells that I have already mentioned. I am repeating again. Okay? Stem cells are what? Osteogenic cells, right? Stem cells do what? Multiply by mitosis, right? To produce new cells. Stem cells produce what? New cells. We all know that. Stem cells produce new cells. Young cells are what? Osteoblasts. Mature old cells are osteocytes. And giant big cells are osteoclasts. Remember? This is important. Okay. Now you tell me, who are more active? Osteoblasts or osteocytes? What do you think? Like young people are more active or old people are more active?
Young people.
Yeah, right? So osteoblasts are more active. Osteocytes are much less active. They just sit quiet, okay? Don't do much activity. You know, old people sit inside the house, don't do much. Okay. So now the question is, osteoblasts are active to do what? Osteoblasts produce the matrix that is called osteoid. So osteoblasts produce, their young cells produce osteoid, which is the matrix of the bone matrix. Okay? Bone matrix, osteoid. Because they are active, they are continuously producing matrix. Osteoclasts are giant cells. They have many mitochondria inside. Mitochondria are called what? Powerhouse, right? So they have many powerhouses inside. Many nuclei, control centers inside. So they are very powerful. Make sense? Osteoclasts, big and what? Mighty. Big and what? Mighty. They love to destroy, okay? So osteoclasts destroy matrix. Osteoclasts destroy the matrix. Now you tell me, who produces matrix and who destroys matrix?
Blasts form, clasts destroy.
Very good. Blasts produce matrix and clasts destroy matrix, right?
To keep the balance of the
Yes, very good. So, both are active. That means what? In the body, bone tissue is being produced and old bone tissue is being destroyed. Is it clear? And that is called bone remodeling. Simultaneously, both are happening. New bone tissue is being formed by osteoblasts, right? Because they produce matrix. And old bone tissue is being destroyed by osteoclasts because they love to destroy, okay? And both are active in the body. Now you tell me, osteoblasts produce matrix, osteoclasts destroy matrix. When the body is growing in early part of your life, right? The bones are growing first. Who are more active?
osteoblasts.
Blasts, because they form, right? Bone tissue matrix. Osteoclasts are less active. Now, in old people, osteoclasts are more active. So, the destruction is more than production. That's why bones get weak, right? And more fragile. So, that is bone remodeling. Simultaneously bone tissue formation and destruction. But the ratio is different at different stages of life. Make sense? Okay. So, those are the functions of 4 different types of bone cells. looking at this side. Okay, good. So those are cells, different types of cells. This is an osteogenic cell, stem cell. This is healthy young cell, osteoblast, right? You know that young people are healthy, and when this one will get old, it will look like this. Make sense? Smaller, but has processes. So osteocyte is smaller, but has multiple processes. Okay. Osteoblasts are young and healthy. Osteoclasts, giant cell.